All right, before we have a chat to Dan Tehan, who's going to explain these big changes when it comes to childcare, and I've always had a great belief, if you can nail small business policy and childcare policy, you'll be around for some time as a government. Two big areas that are very complicated to work out, but a nice clean fix for the next few months, the next 6 months, when nobody's going to have to pay for childcare. It'll be us, the taxpayer, doing it to make sure that everyone who is currently working in those essential jobs, and if you're in those jobs, you are in an essential job for at least the next 6 months, it's going to be picked up by the taxpayer. Nicholas, I did want to give you a chance to respond, but also just to engage with this central idea. Again, let's go back to Greg Sheridan's thesis here, which is about that centre-right politics is being rewritten because you're having it in real time. You've got obviously Australia, our home country that we're interested, but the tectonic plates and leaders here of the United States who've pulled $3 trillion into stimulus with apparently $2 trillion more to come when it comes to infrastructure. You've got Boris Johnson leading a centre-right government that was able to get big historic wins in traditional Labor areas, who's going to obviously be doing something along the same lines in a pure, cold political strategy thing. Is there any part of you that says, oh, the other guys have worked this out? They've worked out the 1% difference that often we end up fighting about every 3 years.
Well, look, I think there's actually a lot of truth in all that. I mean, I've worn the red handkerchief tonight because we're all socialists now, Paul Murray. We are all socialists now. And just listening to yourself and Krogs and Bronwyn there, I think they're going to do me out of a job on a Thursday night. I mean, they're just taking all my arguments. I mean, let's reflect Michael Kroger. Let's soak the mega rich. That's what he wanted. That was his prescription for Australia.
Fair share, I think.
Your prescription was, hey, there's nothing wrong with big government if they're helping bogan kids get a good education. Hallelujah, brother. That's what I've been saying for years.
When have I ever argued otherwise?
And there was Bronwyn saying we need to rebuild manufacturing. I'm with you, sister. I've been saying the same thing for years. So this has very much remade centre-right politics because it's. Hang on, Bronwyn. I heard you. I listened to you. So please give me a moment here. I mean, you've made my arguments so well tonight, so I'm just echoing them back to the audience.
No,
and the fact is, centre-right politics, it's over. It's dead.
It's over.
We all know that small government is ill-suited to big crises. And that's what we've got at the moment. It's not based on ideology. It's just based on what works in the circumstances. And this sort of neoliberal doctrine that has prevailed in Australia for the last 10 years or more, it's just not going to work anymore. Now, the interesting thing about Australia is that we've never been overly consumed by ideology and doctrine. We've always really focused on what works. In fact, there's this great book by a gentleman called Albert Metten. He was the French finance minister and he visited Australia in the 1890s.
Please regale us with your stories of this fella.
And he wrote a book about this country, Australia and New Zealand, and he called it a workers' paradise, and he described these high standards of living, and he looked at the policies that delivered these great conditions, and he described Australia and New Zealand as countries that were socialism without doctrine. They were policies which the left in Europe could only ever dream of, but they were being put in place here in Australia, delivering fantastic outcomes for the people of this country. But they had no idea that it was related back to socialism. They were just doing what works.
But hang on,
that's what we've seen from the Australian government this week, and that's what we're going to see going forward
that their ability to go as far as they can now is because of the hard yards they've put in for the 7 years leading up to this?
Well, I think Australia found itself in a strong budget position because of many years of good government in this country, not just related to the Morrison government, but the government.
The one where you took the giant pile of surplus and turned it into. Anyway, I want to get to Dan.
I don't want to get into these silly red team, blue team games.
Oh, yeah, we're all team red now, apparently.
We're all socialists now, so let's just move on.
Michael, I'll give you 30 seconds to put him back in his box. Come on, Michael.
Look, Paul,
soak the rich.
I don't know where to start next.
Soak the mega rich.
The coalition Conservative forces have not been running schools policy in this country. They haven't been running the university policy. They haven't been running the Senate. They haven't been running the public service. They haven't been, running so many other structures of government.
Correct.
They haven't been running the ABC. They basically lost environment policy. We've lost policy in relation to over-regulation in this country. Basically, Conservative parties have lost so many structures, control of structures in this country, dating way back to the 1960s. Thank goodness we got control of our borders and much of the economy a bit. For the rest, cultural battles have been lost by coalition and conservative forces for 50 years. It's that victory by the left that has done so much immense damage to this country. And of course, in the last 20 years, we started with the anti-uranium nutters in the 70s, the damage that caused us to keep uranium in the ground since the 1970s, and now overlaid with the tree-hugging nutters of the Greens, who are doing immense damage now with lawfare, misusing the courts to stifle, you know, poor old people in India getting some coal to get some electricity, for God's sake. You know, the energy poor. I could go on and on about Nick's thesis about how wrong it is. The bottom line is you have a strong economy because you've had strong coalition governments that know how to run countries, but your people have clogged and choked this country, from schools to universities to the public sector to the Senate, local councils, the media, the ABC, the Fairfax Press. On it goes.
Hallelujah, brother. By the way,
so hang on, let me get this. Hang on, I've got to get this straight. So what Michael Kroger is telling us,
but come on,
what he's telling us is,
got to have a go. This is the problem with you freaking lefties.
This is what Michael's saying. We believe in big government, but we're going to get our people to run the show. That's basically the new Liberal thesis in Australia.
No, this at its absolute heart, Bronwyn, of course, is about sovereignty. And we have been reminded, those that have tried to pretend borders don't matter, culture doesn't matter, all of those people have got a clear lesson in reality. And Bronwyn, this is where I think you speak absolute truth, which is the joy of... I mean, I remember being laughed and sneered at when I said the joy of being an island in a situation like this, as if it was some sort of a comment about how small-minded we are. No, nations matter. Borders matter.
Yes.
Correct.
And not only that, governments that care about the individual and let the individual use their talents and their ability to succeed, and not the collective, where the individual can be sacrificed to that collective. The big job ahead is the government, having given the large expenditure, is going to be to roll it back once it's no longer needed. And then you're going to have the special pleading groups. And that's where it's going to take a very strong government with a very strong commitment to free enterprise.
Yep.
It'll get the country back.
Well, and as Nick says, what? Right-wingers, we're in favour of a big government as long as we run it. You say culture matters as long as you guys run it.
Paul, Nick,
we're all socialists now, guys. I'll send you the red flag for next week.
Nick, you're a number 11 batsman on a good day, mate. On a good day, you're at number 11.